Previously on Unscripted.
I'm on the highway driving 100 kilometers an hour.
I'm dying.
So I wanted to get even. So I turned to you, because you're in the car, in the back seat, and I said, that's it. Skip, show him your balls.
You're listening to Unscripted with Skip Sherman and Josh Obadia.
Okay, Skip, so today we're going to talk about fictional bands. But before we get to that, I'm sure you heard the news that iconic Hockey Night in Canada play-by-play announcer Bob Cole passed away a few days ago.
Yeah, I did hear that. Obviously, sad loss for the hockey community.
Yes, indeed. And I'm sure you recall a few years ago, we did an episode where we listed our favorite play-by-play announcers in all sports.
I think you had Bob Cole in your list. I don't think I had him in mine.
Actually, I think it's the other way around. You had Bob Cole in your list, and I didn't have him in mine.
There you go. You see what happens? I can't even remember what I ate for breakfast.
So when I heard the news that he passed away at the age of 90, by the way, I immediately thought of that episode that we did a few years ago. Now, there have been tons of tributes to Bob Cole on television, on the internet. I'm not going to be able to add anything more intelligent than anyone else has already said, because I've never had the chance to meet him. But he was, I guess you could say, like the voice of our youth, because you and I and millions of other people watched Hockey Night in Canada, and I used to watch it a lot more when I was a kid than I do now. And so, you know, you would hear that familiar voice every Saturday night. Him and Dick Irvin, the two of them.
Yeah. I mean, in our real youth, I mean, when I remember being like a little kid, there was like Danny Gallivan, Dick Irvin. That was like the voice of the Canadians.
Right.
But that ended when we were like maybe less than 10. We were really young, right?
Right.
So really like our entire like fandom of hockey, when we actually were real fans of hockey and understood the game, and, you know, we were a little bit more mature. It's Bob Cole, right? I mean, there's some real iconic calls that like I could right off the top of my head, I'm like, oh yeah, the first thing I thought of when he passed away is like, first of all, everyone knows the Canadians were the last team to win the Stanley Cup. That goes all the way, last Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup. That's in '93. And his iconic call at the end, you know, the Canadians win the Stanley Cup. It's like, you could hear it. I could hear it in my head right now.
Now, also back then, there was really only one hockey game a week, Saturday night. You didn't have a hockey game every night on television like you do now. So it was a much bigger deal to me, to everybody, I guess, when you would schedule, you know, your Saturday night to watch the hockey game. So it was a much bigger deal back then.
Yeah, and it's hard to imagine, like, for kids now, like my son, who's like a huge sports fan, that like you couldn't watch every game. Like, how is that even possible that you couldn't watch every game? You know? It was weird. Like that seems kind of crazy to think back now, you know? Yeah.
One thing that I learned this week, you know, because of all the obituaries and tributes that were done about him, he was an actual professional curler in the Maritimes. I had no idea, which is pretty cool.
That is cool. That's how Canadian can you be? What, can you be more Canadian than that? Come on.
So we pass on our condolences to Bob Cole's family, and we celebrate an amazing career. Do we have any listener mail?
Mailbag.
We have a little bit of listener mail. You know, it's interesting because we've done a lot of episodes this year on like the review or the synopsis or our thoughts on like a specific TV show or a series, you know, that we've watched.
Yeah.
And most of them are like shows that have been over for a while. So people have had a real chance to watch them all, right? Because a lot of them are like stuff that I've watched last year that you just caught up on, or vice versa, you know? So, but now we did Curb Your Enthusiasm, which literally just ended like the week that we recorded. So I get the feeling that there's a lot of people that just haven't caught up yet, you know? So we scared them away, you know, because the episodes are basically 100% spoilers that we kind of scared them away. So
no one has even listened to the last episode yet, let alone sent any listener mail.
Yeah, well, you know, we do have a little bit of listener mail. So Lenny from Montreal, my uncle, he doesn't send mail. He just calls me to tell me about the podcast.
That's so funny.
He says he really liked the final season. He thought the ending was really good. He liked what they did with the copy of the Seinfeld ending. And he heard me say basically, and you, that the early seasons were better. And like, I tend to agree with that too. But he said he really, really liked the last few seasons. He thought they're still super clever and is just as good as always, you know? So Jeff from Montreal just commented, best season ever. So Jeff really liked season 12. So
I've heard other people, like coworkers, have told me that too.
I mean, the final season really has like a star factor to it, like all the guest stars, like you mentioned, right? It's bigger, you know what I mean? It's bigger than the others, you know?
And there's callbacks to previous scenes from previous episodes and previous seasons.
Exactly. And then Val from Montreal commented, she hadn't listened to the episode yet, but she said, she saw our post on Facebook, and she said, I'm going to have to listen to this. Fond memories of discussing Seinfeld with you between cubicles. So that's me, because she was a coworker. I used to sit next to her. So yeah, we did have a bond on Seinfeld. So yeah, that's all the listener mail. I thought a lot about Curb Your Enthusiasm this week. I am gonna miss the show. Like, it was really fun watching it every week this season 12. Like, really watching a show. Like, I didn't binge it, which is rare. You know, I kind of watched it week to week, and it was super enjoyable. So.
Yeah, I guess the only thing we have to look forward to now is this Seinfeld movie, which I saw the trailer for it. I'm not even sure what the movie's called. I know it's like something to do with Pop-Tarts. I'm not sure if the movie is any good, though.
It looks absolutely ridiculous and stupid. Honestly, it looks like the dumbest thing in the world.
Okay, we'll be right back after this to talk about fictional bands.
You're listening to Unscripted.
Are you taking a month-long vacation in the stratosphere and you know how hard it is to hold your breath? Are you the cosmic kid in full costume dress? You've got a nice little place in the podcast universe with Set Listing Bruce. Set Listing Bruce is your podcast for all things Bruce Springsteen fandom. We discuss his music, we talk about his tour, and we also talk to fans of other musicians and share their story of their passion, their fandom, and the way that their favorite artist music makes them feel. Set Listing Bruce, a Bruce Springsteen fan podcast, is available wherever you find podcasts. Remember, there is magic in the night.
And now, back to Unscripted.
Okay, Skip, we're back.
So 2 episodes ago, we did Daisy Jones and the Six. And then just thinking about other potential topics, we came up with, like, you mentioned that, you know, when we talked about Daisy Jones, we said you can download their album on iTunes and Spotify, and like it's if it's a real album, Aurora, right? And you said like they're the first fictional band to like top the charts and all this. That got us both thinking about what are some other great fictional bands, like in movies or TV shows, that we really like, or that you thought were great bands, or like, I don't know. I had trouble like figuring out like what my criteria was going to be for this. Do I have to really like the music? Do I have to just like the band or the artist? Like it's a little bit like unclear, and we may have completely diverging kind of lists in that, like we may prioritize certain things over another. Like, I don't know. It came to me pretty quickly though, because I thought it would be hard to find fictional bands. There's actually so many. Like, there's so many. I was surprised at actually how many I had to leave off my top 5.
There were a lot more than I thought. When you first suggested this topic, I mean, there were 3 that came to my mind pretty much right away before I even did any research. And then when I did some research, I think I got a list of, 8 that I liked. And obviously I narrowed it down to 5. But there were a lot more than I expected. Now, my list, I know we said movies and or television shows, but all of mine are from movies. None of them are from television shows. Which is fine. And then some of the criteria that I used to decide if it got in or not is if I actually liked the movie. So if I liked the movie, even if I didn't necessarily like the band or the music, then I put it in.
Okay, that's fair. The thing is, when I did the research on this too, I realized there's going to be so many that you weren't even going to consider. Like, you don't have kids, so like I have two that are grown now, but like when you look up lists of like fictional bands, there's so many in kids shows, like cartoons, Disney shows. I mean, like, I'm gonna go through the honorable mentions later, but like Hannah Montana is like the most obvious one, you know, like stuff like this, right? Like these would never even like pop into your head, like you don't even consider those, but there's so many like that, you know, which is kind of weird. But anyways, I do have one in my list that's from a Disney show that made my top 5 because I really felt like I had to put it there. So you'll see. So you won't know one of my 5, that's for sure. You know?
Okay. Well, go ahead. Why don't you start?
Number 5.
Sure. I actually, before I start, I got a little bit creative, and I was gonna like tell you what I did here, but then I was like, well, no, because it's kind of like against like our principles of like unscripted. This is the most scripted unscripted that I've ever had, right? Because I took the time and I tapped into my creative side, and I wrote out like a little blurb about each of my top 5. Like, you'll see, like, it's as if they were real. Like, I'm going to talk to you about these bands like as if they were real. I'm not going to start off by telling you it's from this movie and this is the band.
Okay. That's cool.
So number 5 for me is Jackson Maine and Allie, who eventually became Allie Maine. We actually don't know Allie's first name until she married Jackson. I don't know if you know Jackson Maine, Josh. He was a very famous country rock singer who had some really big hits in the 90s and early 2000s. Black Eyes, Alibi, and the big smash hit, Maybe It's Time. You still don't know who I'm talking about?
No, I don't. I'd have to hear it. Maybe if I heard it, I would know.
Yeah,
It.
so he met Allie. No one knows her last name, like I said. And Allie rose to superstardom after she joined Jackson on stage in concert, singing together their big smash hit, Shallow. So she toured with him for a while, and eventually the two married. Allie went on to a huge, successful solo pop career. And of course, we know the story now that Jackson Maine battled alcohol abuse and depression his whole life. Eventually, he took his own life in suicide. And then Allie famously sang the song I'll Never Love Again as a tribute to her late husband at the Grammys shortly after. Now, of course, I don't know, you never saw the movie A Star is Born from 2018 with Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga?
No, I haven't. Nor have I seen the original A Star is Born from like 40 years ago or whenever it was.
There's actually more than the original. There's that one with Barbra Streisand, but there's one from even earlier, like in the 50s or the 40s. So Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga's characters, specifically Lady Gaga's character, Allie, from A Star is Born from 2018 is my number 5.
Okay, so number 5 for me is the band is called Marvin Berry and the Starlighters. And if you just said that to me without telling me what movie it's from, I wouldn't know.
I know.
It's Back to the Future.
Yes. Yeah.
So Back to the Future is one of my favorite movies of all time. And, I was reading up about this band. So someone wrote they should actually be known as Marty McFly and the Starlighters because, it's Michael J. Fox that makes the band as amazing as they are. And the original lead singer of the Starlighters is Marvin Berry, and he's like the fictional cousin of Chuck Berry, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So this is like supposed to be how Chuck Berry became famous because he heard the song and then he sang the song and then whatever. So
he calls him on the phone. He's like, "Listen, here's your sound. I got it."
Exactly.
Chuck, it's Marvin, your cousin Marvin Berry. You know that new sound you looking for? Well, listen to this.
So something interesting about this movie that I didn't know. So apparently there's a scene in the movie where Marty's being chased by terrorists. I haven't seen the movie in a long time, so I vaguely remember the scene.
The Libyans.
Right. So originally the actor was not supposed to be Michael J. Fox. It was supposed to be Eric Stoltz originally.
Yeah. I saw a documentary about the making of this movie. They actually started filming. There's scenes with Eric Stoltz.
Well,
like they've started the movie.
Yeah.
And it was a completely different movie. They hated it and they reshot it all. Yeah.
However, the scenes that Eric Stoltz was in when being chased by the terrorists in a car, they just left those scenes in there. So it's not Michael J. Fox because you can't really tell who's driving the car.
Beautiful. Love it.
So they just left those scenes because I guess they're hard to shoot those scenes, right? So
of course, yeah. Well, back in 1984, it was hard, right? So
right. So anyway, so I just thought that was funny. And another funny thing was in the Spanish version of this movie. So you know how they mention Calvin Klein in the movie?
Yeah, sure.
In the Spanish version, they don't. They mention Levi Strauss.
So she calls him Levi Strauss instead of Calvin Klein.
Apparently, yes.
There is a very interesting documentary on Netflix about the making of this movie.
Well, now that you told me that, I'm going to go watch it.
It's really fascinating, actually. Yeah. Good stuff. I love it. I didn't even have Marvin, Berry, and the Starlighters on my honorable mentions. So I think our lists are going to really, who knows what's going to happen here.
We must have at least one the same.
Number 4.
Yeah, so I'm on number 4, and I do think my number 4 is going to be on your list. So this band is called, they're called the Wonders, and but they also had some other names, the Oneaters, and then briefly Captain Geach and the Shrimp Shack Shooters.
Yeah, here's the thing. We're not the Wonders right now. We're Captain Geach and the Shrimp Shack Shooters.
This is the story of the rise and fall of an American music sensation, seemingly out of nowhere from rural Pennsylvania. In 1964, the Wonders broke onto the scene with their number 1 hit, That Thing You Do, which actually reached number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100. But, like all crazy music stories, the band broke up at the height of their fame, and to this day, they are the epitome of a one-hit wonder. So, of course, that's from the 1996 movie That Thing You Do, starring Tom Hanks, Tom Everett Scott, Liv Tyler, Steve Zahn, a bunch of other actors. It's still like a really fun movie to watch to this day. The song That Thing You Do, I dare anybody to listen to it and not sing it the rest of the day. This is the classic 2-minute and 30-second song that's going to get in your head, that's never going to get out of your head, and it's still like a fun movie and a really good song. And they could have been a cool 60s band, I guess.
Very nice. Very excellent choice. Okay, so next for me is the band Stillwater from the movie Almost Famous. We've talked about this movie before.
Many times, yeah.
I think it's a really good movie. It's, it's basically not exactly the story of 15-year-old Cameron Crowe, but, loosely based on when he was a teenager. So he actually, I think when he was a kid, he had an opportunity to interview the band Poco for Rolling Stone magazine. So I guess he decided to make a movie. And actually, there is an actual band called Stillwater.
I found this out yesterday because I was looking it up. Because you saw how I've been writing, like I've written these paragraphs. So some movies have like this information available about like as if the band was real. And I was trying to see if that was the case for Stillwater. And well, now I gave it away that it's going to be in my list, but then I found a completely other Stillwater band.
Right. So the real Stillwater band has nothing to do with the band Stillwater from the movie Almost Famous.
Right. Exactly.
But a really good movie. The actors who play the musicians, I read somewhere, they really had to get into their role. They performed on stage, like in small venues before, just to see what it's like to perform on stage and things like that. There's some funny things in the credits at the end of the movie. So in the music credits at the end of the film, it says all songs sung by Stillwater are credited to the characters who would have written them, which I'm not even sure what that means, but it's just weird.
That is weird. So they're saying, because I know the names of the characters, like Russell Hammond is the guitar player played by Billy Crudup, but like they're saying like Russell Hammond wrote the songs. Like how does that even make sense?
I'm not sure. The other funny thing in the credit was this motion picture is a work of fiction. You see this in almost every movie, but this motion picture is a work of fiction. The character Penny Lane is loosely based on an actual person. Most of the other characters in this photo play and all events are fictitious.
Okay. Well, I mean, I've read stuff about this movie that like the interactions, everything that happens with Stillwater is based on all different stories of Cameron Crowe's life as a rock reporter, you know, like different bands. Like some of this happened with Led Zeppelin, some of this happened with whoever, you know, like it's all different interactions that he's had. And Penny Lane, I think, is an amalgamation of like they're supposed to be like this one famous groupie, you know, like who knows. Anyways, I love that movie. I could watch it every day.
There was a really good podcast. I forget the name of the podcast, but you listened to it where it went into detail about this movie. It was like 6 episodes.
What's his name? You're gonna say the guy's name is Miller?
Yes, James Miller. Right. Thank you.
So he did a whole season of his podcast, which is the behind the scenes and the making of Almost Famous. And if you like the movie, it's definitely worth a listen for sure.
Yeah.
Number 3.
All right, number 3 for me. This is where I got. You definitely don't know this one, Josh. I know we grew up in the 80s, but the very seminal 80s rock group Love Handle, a classic American rock band, which according to the Behind the Music style documentary, they broke up due to infighting and ever-dwindling fan base. Years after the breakup, they reunited for the one-night-only mega show because of 2 kids that got the band back together, and those kids are Phineas and Ferb from the famous Disney cartoon show Phineas and Ferb. And they sang their mega hit song, You Snuck Your Way Right Into My Heart, which is 100% like an awesome 80s rock ballad.
But like a ninja of love, repelling down from above, you snuck your way right into my heart.
You have no idea what I'm talking about, but this is from the show Phineas and Ferb, which is an animated series that was on Disney. There was 4 seasons of it, but it was a very popular show. It played on Disney Channel for over 10 years. They kept playing it. And the show is really, really funny. Every episode is literally about these 2 kids, stepbrothers, who just want to like have fun during their summer vacation. Like every episode is what they did on their summer vacation. like one day of summer, you know? And in this episode, they try to get this 80s rock band back together because it's their parents' like favorite group. So they try to get them back together. And it's really well done. The show Phineas and Ferb is really amazing. Like I loved it as an adult when my kids watched it because every episode has music. And in this specific episode, they actually created this fictional rock band, Love Handle. Handle spelled, by the way, Handel. So this fictional rock band, it's so well done because the song is such an 80s power ballad. Like they actually someone had to write this song, you know, like, and it's just really, really great. Like when I told my wife that we were doing this category, she asked me, okay, what's on the list? And I said, well, you know, Love Handle is on the list. And she's like, oh, she was so happy because she also loves that episode and she remembers it well. And the song is I was singing the song all morning, actually.
So I've never heard any of those songs, but I actually have heard of Phineas and Ferb, probably because of you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really fun show as an adult because it's always about music. There's always a song, you know? And I just always thought that the show is incredibly creative and funny, you know, and clever, you know? So that's my number 3.
Okay. Well, I'm going to mention Cameron Crowe again now at number 3. Have you heard of the band called Citizen Dick?
Yeah, I did. This is from the movie Singles.
That's correct. So this is from 1992. And, you know, I've mentioned how 1994 is the best year for music. Mm-hmm. So this came out, you know, a couple years before that. And this soundtrack for this movie is unbelievable. But so there's a scene in the movie where they're interviewing Matt Dillon. He's the lead singer of the band. And the interviewer is asking him, what's the song Touch Me, I'm Dick about? and like, he just says, well, basically, I think, you know, you can say the song, the title really speaks for itself. Like, he doesn't say what it is. He can't because how do you answer a question like that?
Now, a song like Touch Me, I'm Dick is about what?
Well, I think Touch Me, I'm Dick, in essence, speaks for itself. You know, I think that's basically what the song is about. It's about, you know, I think a lot of people might think it's actually about, my name is Dick, and you can touch me, but I think, it can be seen either way.
Anyway, the movie's supposed to be about the cultural impact of the Seattle grunge scene. And if I could just read to you some of the artists that play on the soundtrack: Paul Westerberg, Mother Love Bone, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam. Matt Dillon actually does sing a song called "Hey Joe." It's performed by him. So yeah, I mean, Alice in Chains is on the soundtrack too. I forgot about them.
I loved this movie when it came out. I saw it in the theater, and I absolutely love the soundtrack. The soundtrack is incredible. And it's weird. Like, I actually had, you asked me if I knew what Citizen Dick was, because I did have it in my honorable mention. So I knew right away what you're talking about.
By the way, at the time, Pearl Jam wasn't even known as Pearl Jam. They were still known as Mookie Blaylock at the time.
Actually, the interesting thing is that movie, because you say, like, it was really the start of, like, the grunge era,
Right.
Like, that's when the grunge stuff was just starting. And this movie, I mean, I don't want to say it propelled it, because I don't think it was that popular of a movie, but certainly for music fans, and, we were in our 20s, when this came out. It was like, it was about us, like, it was, so to speak,
It was great. It still is.
Yeah.
Number 2.
All right, number 2 for me, you mentioned them already, Josh. Southern rock band made famous by landing on the cover of Rolling Stone in August of 1973. And I'm talking about Stillwater. The lead singer, Jeff Beebe, who you already mentioned, played by Jason Lee. And of course, Russell Hammond in the show, played by Billy Crudup, were the influences of the band. What's amazing, when you look up this, you can actually find the Rolling Stone article written by the pretend William Miller. I'll send you the link. You can read the article that was written about them in Rolling Stone in the movie. Like, you could see the whole article, which is basically a summary of the movie, because it describes all the things that he witnessed, when they're almost going to die in a plane crash, when Russell was on the top of the roof going to jump into the pool, I am a golden god, all this stuff, right? Like, this is all in the article,
I am a golden god! I am a golden god!
Hey, Russell, don't jump! And you can tell Rolling Stone magazine that my last words were... I'm on drugs.
So yeah, that's the first article written by William Miller, a teenager at the time, who eventually, he followed the band while on tour, which is the premise of the movie. And, of course, as we know, William Miller went on to become a famous rock writer. Cameron Crowe, maybe, essentially, really the real Cameron Crowe.
I felt so bad for William Miller, because he submits his story and then they don't publish it because they're told by the band that none of it's true. But all of it was true.
It was all true. It was all true. And, of course, their famous song, Josh, Stillwater's big hit, Fever Dog. They played in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, you already talked about Almost Famous. I don't have to go into it. Just that I thought it was really, really well done that you could actually read the Rolling Stone article that was written about them, the fake Rolling Stone article. Well, I don't want to say it's fake, but, fictitious.
Okay. Next for me is School of Rock from the movie School of Rock.
I had them in my honorable mention. They
I'm
were
not
originally in my top
surprised.
5. Yeah, it was originally in my top 5, but then I had to squeeze them out. But yeah, it is great. Yeah.
I mean, this is like the perfect movie for Jack Black, because I've seen Jack Black in many movies. In fact, I've seen him play a serious role in some movies, but this is the type of character that you want to see him play. He's perfect for this. So he plays this a guy who loses his job, and then he needs a job, so he becomes a substitute teacher. And then, like, he says to he doesn't want to teach the kids what he's supposed to be teaching the kids. He says, why don't we start a band and we can enter Battle of the Bands, which is kind of ridiculous because, like, you need to be an adult
They're
to enter
kids.
Battle of the Bands. And so he actually enters them in, and I don't know how he gets away with it. I mean, eventually he gets caught, but just a very funny movie. And apparently during the filming, Jack Black, I guess in real life, likes to swear, but he couldn't swear because he's working with kids. So he had to like contain himself, which made it even funnier, actually.
The final scene in that movie, well, I don't want to say the final scene, but like the big climactic scene where they perform their song, you know, School of Rock on stage, you know, at the Battle of Bands. It's really incredible. Like, it's absolutely amazing. You know, it's really great song and so well done, you know.
I think the kids are actually playing the instruments, I think.
I do think so, yes.
If I recall, I read something about that.
Number 1.
I'm going to tell you a tragic story, Josh. In the mid-'80s in Dublin, Ireland, music fan Jimmy Rabbit assembled a ragtag group of working class young people to form a soul band called The Commitments. Just as the band was hitting its stride, booking a few local gigs, they got into a huge fight and broke up on the night of their biggest performance. The argument was over blues and soul legend Wilson Pickett, who, you know, trumpet player of the band, Joey the Lip, told the band that Wilson Pickett was his old friend and he was going to come to the show. And then the lead singer, Deco, thought that Joey made up the whole thing, and they actually had a fist fight on stage, and the band broke up. But in a weird twist, Wilson Pickett's limo pulled up late to the gig just after the fight was over. So he was telling the truth the whole time.
So looking back, Jimmy, what do you feel you've learned most from your experience with the Commitments? Well, that's a tricky question, Terry, but as I always say, we skipped the light fandango, turned cartwheels across the floor. I was feeling kind of seasick, but the crowd called out for more.
And of course, I'm talking about the 1991 movie, The Commitments, which was not really such a big hit, although I remember seeing it in the movie theater, just walking into the movie theater saying, what's this movie? And then watching it and coming out saying, what a great movie, so much fun, so much amazing music. They actually had 2 soundtracks. They released a soundtrack and then they released the soundtrack volume 2. And a lot of the songs, like Mustang Sally, like was played on the radio, you know, it got quite popular. And then it's full of, it's the music is all like the blues and soul music. Mustang Sally, Try a Little Tenderness, and The Midnight Hour, that type of music. Still a great movie to watch. I watched it like last year or the year before. It was on TV. It's still so much fun. And The Commitments are just like the tragic tale, the band that never was, you know?
I was pretty sure that this would be on your list. I didn't know where exactly, but, you know, I know that you really like the movie. I know you really like the songs in that movie. So, I'm not surprised that it's on your list.
Right.
And number 1 for me, you've already mentioned it. It's The Wonders from the movie That Thing You Do. So I love this song. I love this movie. You already said a lot about it. One of my favorite scenes from the movie, and maybe the most important scene in the movie, they get a new drummer. And so when they perform live for the first time with the new drummer, he starts drumming the song, but at a much quicker beat than they planned on singing it. So instead of a ballad, it becomes like a fast, dancey song. And that's what propels them. So I was reading a bit about the movie. So originally Tom Hanks didn't want Tom Everett Scott to be in the movie because Tom Everett Scott looks a bit like Tom Hanks when he was younger, but Hanks's wife convinced him to put him in the movie. Also, some interesting things in the credits of the movie. So the bass player in the credits doesn't have a name and is listed in the credits as TB player, the bass player.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
And another funny thing in the credits, it says, soundtrack released on the Playtone record label, founded by Tom Hanks and Gary Getzman to coincide with the Fictional label in the movie and capitalize on the movie's success.
So they really made a record company called Playtone.
I'm not sure. It says this in the credits, but I don't know if they actually did.
Right, okay, I got you.
Anyway.
Good stuff.
So that is my number 1.
I have a ton of honorable mentions and one that I think you're going to be mad that you didn't put it on your list.
Okay, let's hear it.
I only thought of it. I mean, I didn't even think of it. This morning, my son asked me what we're talking about, and I told him, and he was like, "Oh, what about Robin Sparkles?"
Oh, yes, of course.
From How I Met Your Mother, right? Like
But that's
a
a
really,
solo
really
artist.
good
It's
one.
not really a band. But yes, I guess it could have been.
I know. Yeah. So some other ones that I had honorable mentions is Robin Sparkles, School of Rock, Sing Street, which is a movie that I mentioned before. Daisy Jones and the Six. We did a whole episode about them a few weeks ago. Eddie and the Cruisers. Have you ever seen that movie from the 80s?
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah. From the movie Scott Pilgrim versus the World, they have I don't know if you ever see that movie.
I saw that movie, and I was so looking forward to that movie, and I was so disappointed by that movie.
Disappointed. Me too. The band that they're in is called Sex Bomb. I don't know if you remember.
I forgot the name of the band, but I have seen them. I think that movie was shot in Toronto, actually.
It is. The most famous Muppet or Sesame Street band, Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem.
It's on my honorable mentions.
The Heights, which was a show in the 90s, literally about a band trying to make it. I don't know. They had actually one song that was like popular. My sister's going to comment on this episode, and she loved that show. The most famous fictional band, which neither of us had on our list, which is This Is Spinal Tap. I think that's like people's go-to, whatever. Josie and the Pussycats. You can go with the comic book version or the movie version. There's different ones. Citizen Dick, which you mentioned. CB4. I don't know. Have you ever seen this movie? It's like from like the 80s or the 90s. It's from the 90s, I think. It's with Chris Rock. It's about like a guy who goes to jail. He's a rapper. He writes a very famous song while he's in jail called, well, CB4 is Cell Block 4. So that's what it stands for.
Yeah, I had no idea what that stood for.
His song is called Straight Outta Low Cash. So it's like supposed to be like a take on Straight Outta Compton. Zack Attack from I mean, like I told you before, there's lots of kids shows. So Saved by the Bell, of course, in every kind of show like that, they all end up with a band, right? So in Saved by the Bell, the band's called Zack Attack. I already mentioned Hannah Montana. And then my wife mentioned before we started, because she knew I really liked this movie, Begin Again. It's with Keira Knightley and Mark Ruffalo, and her character, her name is Greta, actually records an album with the help of Mark Ruffalo, who's the producer. That could have made my list. I was actually going to call an audible right before I started and switch out one of my top 5 for this, but I just decided to leave it as is.
So the only one on my honorable mentions that you didn't mention is Sonic Death Monkey.
What's that? I don't know what that is.
That's from the movie High Fidelity.
Oh, that's Jack Black's band.
Correct. And it's interesting because in like a span of a few seconds, they changed the name of the band. So they're formerly known as Sonic Death Monkey, soon to be known as Kathleen Turner Overdrive, and currently known as Barry Jive and the Uptown Five. So they changed their name like 3 times in the span of 3 seconds.
I don't like that movie. I'm sorry. I know it's weird, but
you know what? I don't remember if I like the movie. I have to watch it again.
The thing is, I read the book.
Yes, I read the book, and the book was great.
The book is amazing, and it's British. It takes place in London. It's a different thing. And then for the Americanized Hollywood version, they put it in Chicago. And the themes are the same because he's thinking back to his old girlfriends. That's basically the premise, a lot of it. But it's just not as good. Like, it's just like, I mean, it's fine, but the book is so good.
Yeah, the book is good. The movie's actually, I think I liked the movie. What I didn't like was the TV show.
Oh, no, the TV show, well, I mean, it didn't last. Like, it wasn't that good.
Right.
They tried too hard with that TV show, you know?
It was basically just the movie, but split up into smaller parts. Okay, we'll be right back after this with some final thoughts.
You're listening to Unscripted.
Do you know John Hyatt songs?
Maybe you know them from being covered by Roseanne Cash, Three Dog Night, the Neville Brothers, Emmylou Harris, Eric Clapton, B.B. King, Jeff Healey, Bonnie Raitt, or literally hundreds of others.
Maybe you have some of his albums on your shelf or in your cow-horned Cadillac right now.
I'm Jesse Jackson.
And I'm Sylvan Brough.
And we're going to dive in from A to Z. Join us on the Perfectly Good podcast.
We're going to discuss all of your favorites and uncover some forgotten gems, from Aces Up Your Sleeve to Zero House.
Rate and debate every John Hyatt song on the Perfectly Good podcast. Have a little faith.
Unscripted with Skip and Josh is available wherever you listen to podcasts. If you listen to the show through Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. To interact with the show, send an email to skipandjoshshow@gmail.com. Follow the show on Twitter and go to Facebook to like the show page. And now, some final thoughts from the guys.
So I haven't done this in a while, but I have a couple of TV recommendations. I don't know if you're going to like them, but for the listeners in general.
I need some recommendations. I have nothing to watch these days.
There's a show on Disney. In the US, I believe it's a Hulu thing, called Shogun. And I don't know if you remember the miniseries Shogun from the 80s.
I do. I didn't watch it, but I do remember the name of it.
Yeah. So there's a brand new version of this that's on Disney Plus in Canada. It is an absolutely incredible show, although sometimes I didn't know what the hell was going on. I mean, it's all in subtitles. Most, like 70% of what happens is they're speaking Japanese with subtitles. So it's like you really have to. We have such a short attention spans, like everybody does. Like you look at your phone while you're watching TV or movies. This is a natural thing. You can't do that with this because you have to read, you know? But the show was really, really great. The season finale was just this past week. There's 10 episodes, and I would highly recommend it for everybody. And then speaking of, like, since we're into the theme of the Japanese stuff, there's also a show in Canada. It's on Crave. In the US, I believe it's on FX, called Tokyo Vice. And we watched season 1 of this show like 2 years ago. And I didn't even have any idea that there would be a season 2. Like, I didn't even think about it. And then all of a sudden, oh, there's season 2 of Tokyo Vice. It was amazing. We loved it. I loved it. It's great. Again, a lot of Japanese, a lot of subtitles, but there is a lot of more English in this. But both great shows, especially if you're interested in like Japanese culture. I think it's like even bonus, right? Because that's what it's about. So,
okay, thanks for those recommendations. So, Skip, we're almost halfway. Actually, we're probably more than halfway through Passover. And you know that I love to eat bagels. So I'm not able to do that during Passover. So the one thing that I do look forward to during this holiday is eating those elite flake bars. However, this year when I went to the grocery store, they were nowhere to be found. And so I'm very disappointed. You were the person who introduced me to those elite flake bars, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago. And I've been in love with them ever since. And now I can't find them anymore.
Have you been able to get them every year? Usually you can find them?
I think, last year might have been the first year that I couldn't find them. And I haven't been able to find them since. So I don't know if they exist anymore.
This is a great question. We got to get the listeners involved. We got to rally the troops. We got to get the unscripters involved.
I used to buy a whole box. Like when I discovered you could buy a whole box, and it's a pretty, there's a good number of those chocolate bars in that one box. And then I used to try to I think there's 24 in the box or something, and there's 8 days. So I used to, make sure that I would eat the right amount per day so that I have some left over on the last day. It was like a whole project for me.
It's a great chocolate bar. They're just a little bit messy to eat. There's a couple of stores in my neighborhood that I'm gonna try to go to today or tomorrow and see if I can scout this out for you, because I know where I've bought them before. I haven't bought a box like you, maybe for a million years, but I think I have a lead in my head at least on where to get them. But maybe you're right. Maybe they don't exist anymore. I don't know.
Anyway, it's a little too late for me to get them for this year's holiday, but maybe for next year.
But who says you have to eat those on Passover? You can eat those whenever you want.
That's true. And you're right. They are messy to eat. You can't eat them like sitting on the couch, because forget about it. You're going to have chocolate all over your couch.
All right, Josh, it was a great episode talking about fictional bands. We have a lot to prepare for our next episode. Our next episode is number 300. I don't know if we're going to do something special or maybe just like regular stuff. We haven't really decided.
We should just read listener mail for the whole episode. Send us mail about anything you want to talk about. That's going to be the whole episode.
That sounds good, actually. All right. Great talking to you. I'll talk to you next time.
Have a great week.